In the heart of the Soviet Union, during the icy winter of 1959, a group of young adventurers set out on a journey that would become one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the 20th century. They were 9 hikers, most of them students from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, smart, strong, and ambitious. They were the kind of people who thrived on challenge. For them, trekking across the unforgiving Ural Mountains was not just recreation, it was a test of skill, courage, and endurance. Leading them was Igor Dyatlov, just 23 years old but already known for his discipline and determination. His companions included men and women in their 20s, friends bound together by their love of the outdoors and their trust in each other. Their mission was to reach the remote peak of Otorten, a name that in the local Mansi language means "don't go there." The phrase, though ominous, didn't shake their resolve. For these hikers, the challenge was everything. On January 27th, they began their trek. At first, spirits were high. Photographs later recovered from their cameras show smiling faces, snow-covered landscapes, and the camaraderie of youth. But as the days passed, the weather grew harsh. The cold intensified, winds screamed through the valleys, and visibility dropped to almost nothing. The higher they climbed, the more unforgiving the mountain became. On February 1st, the group made a critical decision. Instead of continuing toward their planned campsite in the forest, they chose to stop and set up their tent on the exposed slope of a mountain. The locals called Kolat, or Mountain of the Dead. It was a strange choice, and no one knows exactly why they made it. Maybe they wanted to practice camping on a slope. Maybe they lost their way in the storm. Or maybe Dyatlov simply decided they'd gone far enough for the day. Whatever the reason, that night they pitched their tent in the open snow, bracing against winds that cut like knives. It would be the last night of their lives. When the hikers failed to return on schedule, family and friends grew anxious. The Soviet authorities eventually sent out a search party. Weeks later, rescuers stumbled upon a haunting scene. The tent was still standing on the slope of Kolat, half buried in snow. But something was terribly wrong. The fabric was slashed open from the inside, as though the hikers had clawed their way out in a desperate rush. Their boots, coats, and gear were still neatly arranged inside, untouched. And the hikers themselves? They were gone. The mountain was silent, the snow heavy with secrets. What had forced 9 experienced hikers to cut themselves out of their own shelter and flee into the frozen wilderness, half-dressed, in temperatures that could freeze flesh within minutes? The answers, when they came, would only deepen the mystery. The search for the missing hikers stretched on for weeks. Families waited in agony, their hopes fading with each passing day. Finally, in late February 1959, rescuers trudging across the endless white of the Ural Mountains stumbled upon something strange, something that even the most seasoned searchers could hardly comprehend. Half buried in snow, the hiker's tent stood eerily still against the slope of Kolat. At first glance, it looked intact. But when investigators pulled it open, the truth was chilling. The fabric had been slashed from the inside. Whatever had happened, the hikers had not calmly unzipped their way out. They had ripped their way through in blind panic, abandoning boots, coats, food, and equipment. Their lifeline in that hostile wilderness was left behind. For experienced mountaineers, this was unthinkable. Why would they flee into the blizzard, in the dead of night, without even their shoes? The search team soon found more. Just a short distance down the slope, beneath the trees at the forest's edge, lay the bodies of 2 hikers. They were dressed only in underwear, without jackets or boots, as if they had run into the cold in a rush. Nearby, the remnants of a small fire flickered no more than ashes. A desperate, failed attempt to survive. A few hundred yards away, 3 more bodies were discovered. These were Igor Dyatlov himself, along with 2 of his friends. They had collapsed in the snow, halfway between the forest and the tent, as if trying to crawl back. Their positions told a story of desperation, the struggle to return, the unbearable cold closing in with every step. But the mystery didn't stop there. The final 4 hikers were found much later in May, buried under several feet of snow in a ravine. Their condition was even more disturbing. Some had severe internal injuries, ribs shattered, skulls fractured. Yet strangely, their skin bore no signs of external wounds that would explain such trauma. One young woman was missing her tongue. The medical examiner ruled that some had died of hypothermia, but others had suffered massive injuries, comparable to the force of a car crash. And still, their clothes told another strange story. Garments were swapped among them. As if in desperation, the survivors had stripped the dead to keep warm. This was no ordinary accident. The rescue team was shaken. Soldiers and volunteers whispered about the supernatural, about curses whispered by the native Mansi people, about forces beyond human understanding. Soviet authorities, meanwhile, launched an investigation, but their conclusions were vague, even unsatisfying. They spoke only of a compelling natural force that drove the hikers to their deaths. Compelling force? What did that mean? The mystery of the Dyatlov Pass was born that winter. And in the decades since, countless theories have emerged to explain what happened on that desolate mountain slope, from avalanches and secret military tests to UFOs and Yetis. As word of the hikers' bizarre death spread, speculation erupted like wildfire. For many, the official explanation of a vague, compelling natural force wasn't just unsatisfying, it was insulting. 9 strong, experienced young adults don't just tear through their tent in the middle of the night and run, barefoot into sub-zero temperatures for no reason. Something extraordinary must have happened on that slope. And so the theories began. One of the earliest rumors blamed the Mansi people, the indigenous reindeer herders who lived in the region. Some suggested the hikers had trespassed on sacred ground and been punished, but this was quickly dismissed. The Mansi were known to be peaceful, and there was no evidence of a struggle, no signs of other footprints except the hikers' own. Another theory pointed to the Soviet military. The Cold War was in full swing, and rumors circulated about secret weapons tests in the Ural Mountains. Some believed the hikers might have stumbled into the path of a rocket experiment or been caught in the blast of a parachute mine test. The injuries, shattered ribs, crushed skulls, seemed to fit with a powerful explosion. But if so, where were the burns, the debris, the evidence? None was ever found. Then came the paranormal explanations. Some said a Yeti-like creature had attacked them, pointing to the brutal injuries and the terror that must have driven them from their tent. Others went even further, claiming it was aliens. Strange lights in the sky were reportedly seen by people nearby around the same time. UFO enthusiasts argued that the hikers had encountered something unearthly, their fear overwhelming, their deaths a result of forces beyond human comprehension. To the Soviet authorities, such talk was nonsense. But to ordinary people, the lack of answers only fueled the imagination. And then there was a scientific curiosity, infrasound. Researchers decades later suggested that the peculiar shape of the mountain could create a phenomenon known as the Kármán vortex street, generating low-frequency sound waves. These infrasound waves can't be heard by the human ear, but they can cause intense feelings of fear, nausea, and panic. Perhaps some suggested the hikers were overcome by terror, their rational minds hijacked by sound. In a frenzy, they cut their way out of the tent and ran into the storm. Still, none of these theories fully explained the details. The missing tongue, the internal injuries without external wounds, the strange clothing swaps, the eerie precision with which they seemed to vanish into the night. For 60 years, the Dyatlov Pass Incident remained one of history's great enigmas. Books were written, documentaries aired, internet forums buzzed with speculation. Each theory captured a piece of the puzzle, but none solved it completely. It was as if the mountain itself had swallowed the truth. But in recent years, a new explanation has emerged, one grounded not in aliens, monsters, or conspiracies, but in the unforgiving logic of nature itself. And for the first time, scientists believe they may have finally uncovered what truly happened that night on the Mountain of the Dead. For decades, the Dyatlov Pass Incident was cloaked in shadows. Every theory left holes, every explanation felt incomplete. But in 2019, 60 years after the tragedy, a new investigation was launched by Russian authorities, backed by modern scientific tools. And for the first time, the puzzle pieces began to fall into place. The answer? Something deceptively simple, an avalanche. At first, even mentioning the word avalanche seemed absurd. After all, search teams had reported no obvious signs of one. But recent research, using advanced snow modeling and even technology borrowed from the Disney movie Frozen, revealed the truth. The hikers had likely been struck by a slab avalanche. Unlike the dramatic walls of snow we imagine in alpine disasters, a slab avalanche is more subtle. It occurs when a heavy block of compacted snow breaks loose and slides downhill. It doesn't leave behind massive destruction, but it can be deadly, especially to anyone in its path. Here's how the scenario unfolds. On February 1st, 1959, Dyatlov's team pitched their tent on the slope of Kolatsyakhl. To anchor it, they cut into the snowpack, creating an unstable surface. Hours later, as winds roared and snow accumulated, that slope gave way. A dense, heavy slab of snow slid down, striking the tent. The impact wasn't catastrophic enough to bury them completely, but it was violent enough to injure some of the hikers, breaking ribs, fracturing skulls, while terrifying the rest. In the chaos, convinced that another collapse might come, they slashed open their tent from the inside and fled into the storm. Once outside, disoriented and half-dressed, they faced temperatures dropping below -20 degrees Fahrenheit. Hypothermia set in quickly. Some tried to build a fire at the tree line, while others attempted to climb a cedar tree to get a better view of their camp. A few attempted to return, but the cold was merciless. One by one, they fell. The strange details that puzzled investigators for decades now began to make sense. The severe internal injuries, caused by the crushing force of the snow slab. The missing tongue, likely the result of natural decomposition and scavenging. Animals in the months before her body was recovered. The bizarre swapping of clothes, a desperate attempt by survivors to stay alive a little longer. It wasn't aliens. It wasn't secret weapons. It wasn't monsters from the snow. It was nature itself, unpredictable, brutal, and indifferent. For many, this explanation finally brought peace. The hikers were not victims of conspiracy or the supernatural. They were victims of the very wilderness they loved. The Dyatlov Pass remains a place of mystery and awe. Even today, hikers travel there to honor the memory of the 9 who lost their lives. But thanks to science and persistence, we no longer have to wonder what happened that fateful night. The mountain kept its secrets for 60 years. Now at last, the silence has been broken.